Welcome to Inside Magazine. I'm David Matlin. In today's show, we bring you an exclusive look into the investigation of the death of Argentine prosecutor Alberto Nisman. Last January, he was found dead at his home in Buenos Aires after 10 years investigating Iran's involvement in the Amia Jewish Center bombing. His findings led him to accuse Argentine President Cristina Kirchner of obstruction of justice in the case. And now the looming question remains: was Alberto Nisman's death a suicide or state crime? After visiting Nisman at his office just a year ago, our producer, Carlos Gurovich, went to find out. And today, we're joined in the studio by Carlos and Argentine journalist in exile here in Israel, Damian Pachter. Well, thank you both for being with us here today. Obviously, a story that's captivated the world here. Damian, I have to start with you as being a journalist in exile now from Argentina. As a journalist in this country, what made you flee for your life?
Well, I sense actually a pretty certain danger on my life after I met an intelligence officer who was pursuing me. And after that, the government, during my escape, they published my flight details on their official Twitter account. So,
which is obviously odd that you see the government posting your travel itinerary.
Yeah, like an Orwellian step, like saying, we are after you. So I just took myself to the place where I live for a big important part of my life, from almost 10 years, where I finished high school and did military service. So it's a second home for me, Israel. So I'm feeling pretty good actually here.
Well, we're glad you made it safely here, and of course joining us in our studio, extra bonus for us. Let's take a look at a clip here from recent, as the investigation has gone on and the story has unfolded here. One of the former Secret Service chiefs in Argentina, Jaime Stiuso, who was involved in this case. Here's a short clip.
I felt that Stiuso, the chief of operations of the Secret Service, was the commander, and Nisman was a soldier. If my words weren't enough, you can check the recent book published by Gerardo Young about the Secret Service. He says the same thing I do. The accusation presented by Nisman was written by Stiuso. Nisman was Stiuso's employee and did what he was ordered.
Well, Carlos, you brought us the story originally here, as I mentioned, over a year ago, going to Nisman's office, sitting with the man, seeing the evidence and really getting a feel for his commitment to this now. Shed some light on us here. The plot has thickened here. Jaime Stiuso, his involvement. Tell us a bit about who he is and his involvement here.
Well, David, Jaime Stiuso is a figure that is not known for the international public. He ended his task last December at the Secret Service as Chief of Operations, and he worked in the Secret Service for 40 years. This guy was, his specialty was tape wiring and gathering information about all public figures in Argentina. So it is clear that in 2004, when President Kirchner introduced Stiuso to Nisman, told him, you are going to work together. And they worked together. The book that the Chief of Cabinet of Argentina is talking is this book about Gerardo Young, that investigated for 40 years what happened in the Secret Service and what was the part of Stiuso in this story. And it's alleged that Stiuso wrote the paper that Nisman presented against the president, the foreign chancellor Timmerman, and other figures, that Stiuso utilized Nisman for his own purpose and necessities, and that's why the relationship between Cristina Kirchner, Stiuso, and Nisman broke. Now, Stiuso today has fled out from Argentina. He took out his family. He's on the run. But I am sure he took with him all the information that he has during 40 years. And I am sure that some way or another he will reappear in this saga, not now, maybe many years from now.
again, this plot thickening. It's not to make light of it, but very like a novella here playing out. This is a lot of claims being made on either side, and it seems to be more complicated here. Damian, were you aware of Stuso and his interesting role in this situation as you were starting to investigate this?
Well, he was a pretty familiar guy for the journalists in Argentina. We hear stories about him and politicians talk about him, but just like Carlos said, he was not known publicly. So his name became more public in last December when he got kind of fired and he was turned into public enemy #1. And we are talking 1 month before Nisman's death. So after...
He suddenly became a big name involved in this.
Exactly,
in this story.
but I sense that they were starting something on December, and then it kind of, okay, we have the best argument, and let's just turn Stuso to public enemy #1.
That's a good point. Well, let's take a look here at another clip here as the government does try to frame Stuso as being behind this main complaint against the president here.
La influencia mediática de diarios como Clarín y La Nación.
The influence that have newspapers such as Clarín and La Nación, that I call the corporative media, together with all the TV channels they have,
Dos o tres ideas que son una sola en su conjunto. Se trataba de
they installed 2 to 3 ideas. That is, one idea at the end, that it was a murder committed by a government irritated, hurt, or vindictive, because Nisman's charges against the president, the foreign minister, and other political activists.
Personas menos relevantes que las dos que estoy mencionando. Esto fue lo que
They said that from the beginning, this media group have great influence. They act on the public opinion in a filthy way, as they usually do in any issue.
De una manera soez, como es habitual por otra parte en todos los temas, son fundadores.
They are the founders of a new kind of lies, the traditional, that could be accepted as a mistake, and the intentional, lies that they are behind.
Eso fortaleció en la penetración que tienen.
That strengthens the dissemination of the idea of murder. I'm sure that if you ask in the streets, you'll find a lot of people that the Belgrano University, that is close to the ideology of the Clarín media group, recently presented a survey where only 12% of the people think Nisman committed suicide. That's an absurd idea, rationally unattainable, and definitely marks the diabolic power have these groups to build a reality far from common sense.
El poder diabólico que esos medios tienen para formar opinión, para construir lo que llamamos el sentido común.
Well, Carlos, he mentions this diabolic power here now, the power of the media here to sort of sway public opinion and therefore mislead people, but diabolic, strong words here now. How does that sit with you?
Well, Morales is a kind of spokesman of the government, and he expresses ideas that are very close to the ideology of the Argentinian Cristina Kirchner government. No matter how much the government tries to enforce the idea that the guy committed suicide, for the people he was killed. And they feel that because Nisman represented something for them that the government can't stand. And you remember in the item I did is Kovadlov talking about that, and he says it's a matter of institution. The institutions of Argentina are now attacked by their own government, creating not a democratic regime, but a totalitarian regime. And totalitarian is very simple. Total means everybody must think the same, I think. And if you don't, you become an enemy.
Damian, do you see it the same way or similarly here with the sort of misleading of the press, the government spokespeople, how they've tried to frame this so differently and ultimately paint Nisman as a true threat? How do you see that? Was Nisman an actual threat to this government?
Well, I think that the evidence he found was actually a threat to them. Not only to them, maybe to Iran, who was the main, the enemy who was actually behind the bombing attack, according to the Argentine justice. So the people who could be hurt from Nisman's accusation was, of course, the Argentine government and the Iranian government. He had more, and he died 12 hours before extending his accusation on a special commission in Congress.
Well, let's take a look at the next piece here, which fits into that theme of how Nisman wasn't just the political opposition voicing a problem. Nisman represented the actual law in this case, and therefore a potential true threat to the government. Take a look here.
Este es un gobierno que, al igual que el del expresidente Kirchner,
this government, similar to that of former President Nestor Kirchner, does not tolerate the presence of alternative thinking in the framework of the political arena.
La presencia de un fiscal que con su denuncia
the presence of an attorney who with his charges was about to put at risk the suitability of the president, a foreign minister, and other political figures was an act that violated the possible tolerance an authoritarian regime can stand in regard to those who want to express something different. He was the highest expression of an opposition sustained by law. It was about to endanger the president's management. This man couldn't be heard. I mean, there wasn't any chance that he was heard, because there didn't exist any possibility that a man like him could talk in the Argentine parliament. The Argentine parliament is a place where you can express your dissonance only if it is meant not to change anything. They are a minority, but an attorney is not a minority. He represents the autonomy of justice in regard to the political power, and that hurts the authoritarian and autocratic sensibility of those in power, who will never allow such a dissident figure to prevail.
The
question is not who killed him, or did he commit suicide? The question is, what did he mean that he must be eliminated? He meant the law.
La pregunta no es quién lo mató, la pregunta no es si se suicidó, la pregunta es qué significaba él como para que desapareciera. Significaba la ley.
Since Nisman's death now, which is still being investigated, obviously, what's happened with this case? I mean, he was sitting on a massive pile of evidence. What's been taking place since January, almost 6 months now?
Well, there are two main issues that still attracts the attention of the people. One is the case of what happened to Nisman. He was killed, he committed suicide. There is a medical commission that in these days must decide, and it's very interesting because there are 13 professionals representing the state and two representing the family, and we already know that they will produce a document divided in two parts. In favor of the suicide thesis will be those representing the state, those of the family will say he was killed.
Assumed already? That's just sort of a presumed verdict by this panel?
Now, regarding Nisman and the AMIA case, the state attorney has appointed three new prosecutors, but they have to start to read 1.5 million pages. Who knows when they will finish? 20 years have passed since the attack, and I think it will take a lot of time. So in that case also, we will never know exactly what happens to the AMIA, but, and we discussed it with Damian before.
Are you optimistic, Damian? Are you optimistic about where this case can go still?
I'm optimistic for the work of journalists and others who, if they found new evidence, we are talking about a crime against humanity, which according to Argentine law, it's infinity. It goes and goes. It doesn't have a point that it stops. You can find new evidence and then fill it in an official accusation. So there is still hope, despite the fact that for now things are not looking pretty optimistic from that point of view.
This was the most deadly terrorist attack in the history of Argentina here. Yes. Well, let's wrap up. We need to see a piece of Alberto Nisman himself here discussing the case.
I use an instrument. I apply the law. If one day they appoint another attorney in my place who will work with any bias, he will say exactly the same thing. So, okay, you want to talk against Nisman or about some alliances or acquaintances. Just prove that any of the evidences is wrong. I won't stop to say what I'm saying. And it's not only me sustaining the theory. The Supreme Court and Interpol and all the legal instances I have passed, we won. I am not egocentric. It is common in the judicial system that sometimes your sentences are revoked. In my case, all have been confirmed. The evidence leads. They can say what they want about me. I don't care. I will care when someone will dispute evidence with something concrete in his hands. We already know a great deal of the truth. The question is if we will obtain justice, and I think we'll make it justice. These people will be put on trial. We fight for that. I can't tell you when it will happen, but I am sure it will happen.
Truly ominous words here from Nisman himself. Carlos, as we mentioned, you went there, a very personal connection that you forged with Nisman a year ago, about a year ago. How was it for you to go back and now to get back into this case after his death?
Well, it was very sad because I had the chance to meet Nisman in his office, and he personally opened the door to his archives for the first time to a TV channel and show us the 1.5 million pages he has. Now, we hope that the case won't be closed, but I am sure that we will never know the truth. The truth went with Nisman to his grave.
Well, there you have it. Carlos Gurovich and Damian Pachter, thank you very much for being with us here.
Thank you, David.
As the story continues to unfold, we'll be following closely. Well, that's all for this episode of Inside Magazine here. Thank you for being with us. I'm David Matlin.